Hey, good evening. I'm Kevin Cumbus, president and founder of TUSK Partners. Thank you for making time in your busy schedules this evening to join us. You know, here at TUSK, we spend so much time focused on how to maximize value when we work with clients and take them through a marketed sales process to ensure that they exit the top. And we spend so much time kind of down in the weeds, right? On what's the adjusted EBITDA, what's the multiple, what's driving the multiples, what's really going on in the micro and macroeconomic environment that's driving valuations. We get into structure and on and on and on. And look, if you want to watch more of that stuff, by all means, we have a treasure trove of that on our website. I encourage you to do so. But we're just coming off of a really interesting conversation. We were down at Dykema's Definitive DSO conference in Denver, Colorado. It's their 10th annual year of doing this. There were over 2,000 people there. And like the last 3 years, we were invited to put on a workshop in advance of the conference. Unfortunately, it was limited to 100 practice owners, entrepreneurs that own practices. And it was a heck of a day. I mean, it was just remarkable. All the knowledge transfer that occurred down there was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was by far our best conference we've ever done. And after the conference, it was clear that the audience really, really appreciated two big concepts. And we wanted to go back and revisit two of those today. So I've invited my friend Brett Miller to join me. Brett is a partner and the dental practice area leader at Corient. Brett, it is so good to see you again. How you been?
Doing great, Kevin, and thank you so much for allowing us to participate and join this evening. It seems like blinked twice, and we were just at Dykema last week, even though I realize that's now been a few weeks ago, but certainly this conversation is top of mind, and I'm excited to revisit and I should say reconnect and revisit the conversation.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
100%. I'd like to tell the audience a little bit about you. You know, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for, golly, 15 plus years. Just in full disclosure, I'm a client of Brett's, but our relationship goes far much further back than that. I think it's important that I share with you all a little bit about Brett here. I asked him for a bio, like we always do. We have guests on, and he sent me something special I think is important to share. First thing about Brett, this is his purpose: to inspire a world of community and people at their best, which is fantastic. And the background on Brett, from Gastonia, North Carolina, middle child, proud graduate of the Citadel down in South Carolina, husband and father to amazing kiddos, loves the outdoors, on the water, running, hiking, and golf. Brett, always a pleasure again. Tell us what's been going on in your life and tell us a little bit about Corient. Last time we talked together on stage in Denver, there was a different brand and different logo that you were affiliated with.
You know, I might have had a secret up there that I was bursting at the lips to tell, but was sworn under secrecy that I wasn't quite able to share yet. So I am excited officially as of August 1st. So here only just a few days ago, the 30 plus legacy brands that over the last 3 years have come together as part of, previously we were CI Private Wealth, a new initiative to bring together really the top wealth management firms around the US to form kind of an integrated, cohesive group, a lot of the same synergies and conversations that you're hearing discussed in the dental world. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, conversation was floated around, you know, how are we going to come together under a unified brand? And we actually came together and did a values analysis and said, all right, if we are to understand who we want to be in the marketplace, how would we define ourselves? I'll put a small asterisk. It's also very fun to try to rebrand in the current marketplace where everyone owns the domain named about every current word that's in the universe. So you have to almost go out and
that is a challenging exercise in and of itself.
So thankfully, while it was one of the names of our legacy firms, we decided, and as a partnership came together and voted on Corient, which you can see is a construction of two very impactful words, client and oriented. So we, in essence, believe in the client oriented, the client focus, placing our client first so much we made it our name. So we are excited that as of August 1st, we've rebranded all legacy brands to Corient.
Congrats. I know that's a heavy lift because congrats to you, the partners, and everybody involved in the business. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So a little before we kind of get to the meat of the matter, we, as I started at the top of the presentation, we get pretty myopically focused on valuation, and I think it's important to kind of take a step back, Brett. I think it's important to really understand like what really is your business, what is the purpose of the business. Yeah, we're all capitalists. Yeah, we all want to make money. Yeah, it creates cash flow, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. And this became very, very evident to me back in January of this year when I was reading a book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. I was reading this book and it kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. And there were two key principles in this book that although relatively obvious, it just kind of hit me over the head like an apple. One is that we're all swapping our time for dollars, right? So when we go to the office, we expect to get paid and we expect to get a return on that, because when we're not at the office, we have the opportunity to spend time with our family, go play golf, heck, go to a conference in Denver. So that was a relatively simple concept for me to gather, but kind of glom onto. But the big aha moment was, what are we really trying to maximize with respect to our life and our time on this planet? I think all too often entrepreneurs get caught up in the idea of trying to just maximize wealth for wealth's sake. And it comes at the cost of all of our time and many times our health. And what Bill does such a masterful job of articulating is, maybe you don't want to just maximize wealth or time or even your health. What you want to do there is find some balance. And the conclusion he comes to is, how do we really maximize net fulfillment inside of our lives and look at our work and our businesses as a conduit or tool to enable us to get there? And I'd read this book, and within a matter of weeks, I got a call from you saying, "Hey, you've got to read this book. It's changed my life." And here it was. I was like, "Is it Die with Zero?" You're like, "Absolutely, it's Die with Zero." So this kinship for this book, this kind of book that's connected us, has reshaped a lot of the way I think, and I think you think about how businesses should serve folks over their life and in their exit as well.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, and then it's a bit of a leading question because I'd like to turn around and kind of answer it from my perspective. What is your key takeaway in terms of, as you read Die with Zero, and you and I've had the conversation, we've actually opened our laptops and shared with each other the spreadsheets we created, because yes, we're those kind of geeks after reading the book. But what is the key impact this book had on your life personally, in terms of how did this reshape or reframe the way you view your business as an entrepreneur and a business owner?
Yeah, so first things first, I know I'm kind of giving a peek behind the curtain, but I thankfully I'd already kind of worked with you guys, and I understood what financial independence meant, meaning how many dollars do I have to have socked away to continue to live the lifestyle that I'm living from an expense profile, to never have to be able to live a life where I never spend down all that capital. So I'd been through that exercise, and I knew what the gap was, kind of the gap of where I was to where I needed to be. So from there, it enabled me to think a lot more, I would say, constructively about how I wanted to spend my time. And for example, I started to make lists of things I wanted to do over my lifetime, over any given year, how I wanted to spend my time with my family, with my team. And what was remarkable about that is when I wrote all that stuff down back in January, I've accomplished a lot of it. So I would say it's made me much more purposeful with each and every minute of each and every day. And that's really rewarding.
I'm glad you said the word purposeful, because I would also include the word intentional.
Yeah.
Right. And that was actually my big takeaway in reading Die with Zero, which ironically, you and I both joked how we both reread it on the plane to Dykema.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be lying if I said I reread another section of it on the beach just this last week when I had some downtime, because I wanted to process more of the comment that Perkins makes of stepping out of autopilot.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concept that you and I, as well as the audience at Dykema, resonated with, as business owners, it's very easy for us to be entrenched in this form of autopilot. What the industry, what best practices, it's all the what. This is what you should do. This is what you should do. This is what you should do. But it misses on this very big conversation of the who. And I think we've got it backward, that instead of the what serving the who serving the what, should it not be, how does the business serve you as the business owner? And I'm really excited to continue that conversation of how do we start to insert a wedge and then put some pressure behind it to really open up and shift this conversation of what your mindset needs to be and who you are as a business owner evaluating a transaction.
Yeah, I love that concept of autopilot. I think so many entrepreneurs, you get on the hamster wheel and you get better at running the wheel, you get better at running the wheel, more efficient running the wheel. And next thing you know, you think that the wheel is the entire purpose. And we forget that we actually had a life before we got on the wheel. And it's remarkable to me to see how many entrepreneurs and business owners come to us and say, I just need to get another $200,000 of EBITDA or another $400,000 of EBITDA before I exit. And I'm like, it's risky running these businesses. And I always pose the question, are you sure? Do you know? How much do you need? Are you certain? So I wanted to kind of reflect on those questions, and here I'm gonna hand it over to you in a second. But Brett's a wealth of knowledge, and he's gonna share with you his insights. But in talking with him before this evening's webinar, he just said, look, what I know you're going to share with folks that exit planning is not a past tense thing. It's not a future tense thing. It's something you need to be doing in the present all the time, and that you need a plan. And in order to get a plan started, you got to know where you sit. Where do you stand today? And hopefully by the end of this presentation, we believe that you all will be inspired to have the confidence to leverage the value of the business that you're building, that you're sweating and toiling in every day for your benefit in all sorts of ways. So Brent, I'm excited to see what you brought to us this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And certainly looking forward to the conversation we have moving forward. And you're right that so much of this is about who you are and how you're approaching your business and the mindset that creates. And, one of the things I want to challenge everyone to think through here is, what's that automatic setting? What's that default? And I always love to see body language, which I realize in a webcast environment is difficult to do. But if you're listening to this webcast, I'm curious how many of you are going to start shifting in your seats right now when I describe what is that default mindset. And probably for many of you on tonight, it's, hey, I've got my head down. I'm focused on growing and operating my business. I'm really familiar with the rhythm, the income, the distributions, the cash flow, the spending. I'm dialed in and I'm in the zone of operating and growing my business, which is great, right? You need that focus. And probably for many folks listening, that dedication, that singular focus, that drive is what's allowed you to create such a wonderful entrepreneurial business and to build value. However, right, it's always that hard, but or however,
sure,
this is always the one that I think starts to trip people up, is when you go, yeah, you're really dialed into your current business, but would you believe, Kevin, that 48%, and by the way, these statistics are from the Exit Planning Institute's survey of business owner readiness. 48% of business owners, so this is not dental specific, this is industry agnostic. However, I would surmise that probably spot on with this current state of the dental industry. Kevin, I'll let you speak to that. but 48% of business owners have done no exit planning.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
go, wait,
That sounds right.
so hold on a minute. Traditionally speaking, the value of a dental business is somewhere between 70 and 90% of a business owner's net worth. So your single largest asset. And you've done granular analysis on KPIs to try to squeeze an extra nickel out of cash flow, but we haven't done any analysis around the business itself.
Yeah, when we talk with owners, with the way we describe it, Brett, it is likely your largest income producing asset and most valuable asset. And when you think about it as a portion of your total portfolio, like you say, it's 80-90% of the total value of your invested assets.
Yeah. And so try this on for size, because so many folks say, I'll deal with that later.
Yeah.
Oh, the transaction exit. Kevin, I'm 35 years old. I'm not planning to exit my business for the next X years. Well, that may be true, but if exit planning is present tense, then it should be agnostic as to your timeline, whether it be 2 quarters, 2 years, or 2 decades from now. Because if you focus on exit planning, number one of the big aspects of exit planning is to increase the value of the business. Well, why not do that today? Why not incorporate the additional return on investment from both a valuation as well as a cash flow perspective? Shouldn't that be prudent to do in the interim? 2, exit planning decreases your risk. It lowers systemic risk from things like death, disability, outside business factors. You're all of a sudden building in a succession planning. But then, and I think this is where we really want to start pushing the audience and encouraging people to think a little differently, is exit planning is what allows you to take a step back and detach. And one of my favorite examples of that is Jocko Willenick, great former Navy SEAL, written several books. One is Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership. But he describes this concept of detachment, where one of the hardest things as entrepreneurs and business owners that we have to often do, and why a lot of businesses in the corporate world actually force people to take vacations, is to step away, to step out of the business, to broaden your perspective and look around. Because one of the things that you start to realize when you step back from your business is, hey, there's this fundamental truth that pops up, and that is, what actually really happens when you sell your business. I mean, I think the textbook investment banking answer would be, it's an acceleration of future earnings and planned savings. Yeah, clearly, you're willing to accept a sum of money today for the future profits and growth of the business moving forward. But for a business owner, it actually goes much deeper than that. Now we start talking about, one, a change in liquidity. That, as we just talked about, 70 to 90% of your net worth that was in a single, illiquid, non-readily transactable asset is now highly liquid.
Can I go to liquidity for one quick minute here, Brett?
Yeah.
Because it's really interesting. 10 years ago, I would agree with you almost completely that dental practices are rather illiquid. When I was brokering practices 15 years ago, and someone would come in and say, "Hey, I want to sell my business. How long is it going to take?" Our stock standard line was 18 to 24 months because the buy side was so limited, right? We only had one buyer, and you had to have 3 magic initials behind your name to buy the practice, because DSOs were just in its infant stages. Today, if you own a dental practice or a group, it can be liquid within 6 months. Like the whole world has changed since then. So I would say that it is more liquid than it ever has been. And there's a great, we can give you a clear indication of a clear price to where with 99.9% certainty where the deal is going to trade, give you the bottom of the range so you know the answer to that question.
Right. Right. And with that comes a different way to think about it, right? Because no longer is this, hey, this is a long-term, I will sell when I'm ready, and I know it's going to be a long-term process. Because now it could be, and I think, Kevin, you and I are experiencing this more and more, where folks are saying, hey, this wasn't really something I was thinking of, but with the current state of the marketplace and where valuations are, am I being a prudent business owner?
Well,
am I being a prudent CEO? I need to analyze and determine what a liquidity event would mean for my business as well as my family.
Yeah, let's double click on this for a minute because it's really important. I think over the last couple of years, there has been this sense of urgency. Like I got to sell now because my buddy sold, or even worse, I got an unsolicited offer and they're putting pressure on me with a ticking clock to sign this letter of intent, or this offer is going to go away. And let me tell you what, if anybody's putting a gun to your head to sell your largest income producing asset that's likely your most valuable asset, you don't need to work with that person. And that's kind of what Brett and I are getting to here. This should be a thoughtful process with planning involved to ensure that you're doing it on your terms with 100% confidence. But that just selling because your buddy sold or selling because you got an unsolicited offer, that is a almost a surefire way to exit with regret.
Especially too, Kevin, if you don't anticipate and plan for the change in cash flow, which is what I believe trips up a lot of people. And
100%.
Funny enough, one of my favorite questions from a soon to be retired dental business owner, he said, Brett, you've shown me these financial analysis, everything looks great. He said, I'm a little embarrassed, but I have a very simple question. And he kind of leaned across the table and said, sure, what's your question? He goes, how am I going to get paid? Right.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a sheepish embarrassed, like I should know the answer to this question, but think about it. For years, you've run payroll. Now, sometimes it's Friday night, sometimes it's Sunday morning when you run payroll, but you've had, your proverbial finger on the pulse. You've known the cash flow of the business. If you went on a trip or if you took vacation, you shifted money around, you paid yourself a dividend or a distribution, but there's comfort and stability in controlling your own cash flow. But then once again, if you can't sell the cow and keep the milk, if you sell the business and you get that liquidity event, it doesn't mean you necessarily can turn around and go buy the beach house or go on a shopping spree. I mean, we hope to incorporate some of those aspects in your plan, but really it's how do you reposition the liquidity from the business across a diversified portfolio of investments to include reinvestments in joint ventures and rollover equity, et cetera. But how are you being a steward and prudent with that liquidity event to design cash flow post-sale? And so I'm going to be intentional here and say liquidity and cash flow are what? But then there comes the fun aspect of what is your purpose going to be when you're no longer a business owner?
Yeah, we ask folks, what's your elevator pitch for version 2.0 of yourself? That's a question we like to ask.
Yeah, and how many folks, Kevin, struggle to answer that question? It'd be wonderful here if you could overlay a little bit of Michael Jackson, I'm staring at the man in the mirror, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is change is hard. And we're actually going to talk about this a little bit more, that the what side you can solve. You can do an analysis. We can get everybody comfortable around the what side, but the who side, that's a journey. That's a process. That's one that has to be continuously revisited. And yeah, this is challenging and it's tough, but when done well is what creates, and I think this is fair to say, we don't want folks simply to transition their business. At the end of the day, we want them to transition well. Yeah. How does this end up being a highlight? And how does this end up being that kind of key moment for them where they're happy, they're joyous, they're able to celebrate and move positively into the next chapter.
Yeah, Brett, it's funny. We've worked with 3 doctors recently under the age of 40 that sold their businesses for well over $12 million each. And when I was like, what are you going to do with your life? I mean, and they actually had a plan. They knew what they were going to do. They were excited about it. I get texts from them now. They're at national parks. They're enjoying their lives. 2 of them are in RVs. Like they had a plan. And when the wire hit, they're like, great, let's go execute on the plan. They knew where they were going to go and what they were going to do. It wasn't they're going to toil away on the golf course for the next 60 years, but they were going to get busy living. And it was so fun to see them know their plan, execute on it when the wire hit. And frankly, it allowed them to negotiate from more of a position of power. It was so interesting to see that dynamic play out over the course of those 3 transactions.
Question: is that the majority or the minority?
So I would say it's a question we ask. I think that there's I would say this: there's a couple different characteristics of doctors we work with. Those who absolutely are done with their career and are willing to work the post-sale 3 to 5 years, and they're looking to maximize value. For that group, they know they are on the glide plane to retirement. Then there's the I would say the younger group, let's call it 50 and younger, right? That still have a lot of opportunity. And those are about, I don't know, 60-40, really know what they want to do, and 40% still trying to figure it out, but feel like, look, they want to certainly capitalize on this unique market that we are seeing and take some chips off the table. They still have a job post-sale, right? So they still have employment, they have purpose, but they haven't quite figured out what they're going to do if and when they ever leave the practice. So it's kind of that, and then there's the great middle, and that's where it really gets interesting, because they have all the wisdom, and they kind of sit in the catbird seat, right? They can choose to exit if they've done retirement planning correctly, or they can leverage that wisdom through growth and scale by partnering with the right group. So it's a grab bag, to be candid with you.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that fits with what we see, that kind of once again going back to the Exit Planning Institute's state of business owner readiness. And I'm going to further explain this statistic, but would you believe that 12 months post-close, 75% of business owners regret selling their business?
So that's not our client's experience. Why is that so?
Right. I believe it's indicative of what we're about to cover. If you go back to the previous comment that the majority of business owners have no post-transaction game plan, they're so focused on the business that they say, oh yeah, I'll retire, I'll play golf, I'll travel, they are speaking in hyperboles. I think the reality is that then they get on the other side of a transaction, and once that adrenaline wears off, they're a bit stuck and lost. And so, to the example you were just describing, more and more folks in a positive way. I'm glad that we're seeing positive traction in this conversation. I'm
Sure.
glad to see there's books like Die with Zero. There's books like
Strength to Strength is another
Strength to Strength. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of, in a great way, emerging resources that are helping people think beyond and say, not necessarily what am I moving from, but what am I moving to? And I think, Kevin, it also is I tip my hat to you and your team saying, hey, this is a key part of the conversation. We need to discuss both the who and the what, so we can make sure that as you approach this transaction, that it's right for you, because we want you to expand and grow that 25% plus. We want successful, happy business owners and successful, happy post-business owners.
Yeah, what we talk about here is we only want clients to exit when they are ready, right? And that can mean a lot of things that we're discussing today. But look, we're also playing a long game here at TUSK. We're not going anywhere. And when our clients are ready, we are ready to serve them, because ultimately we just want to create referrals for life like you do. And I'm happy to say that everyone we've worked with is in that camp. And that's the most I mean, that's what gives me the most pride about being involved in this business.
As you should be, Kevin, because you were, from my perspective, you and the team at TUSK are in the minority, and I'm hoping that this permeates and spreads out to more folks in the industry because it's the right thing to do, and it's creating the right conversation.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right, but all right, let's move on.
Yeah, so let's drill down here a minute. So
Yep.
how does this concept actually start to manifest itself, and where can we help, especially for the viewers here this evening, really start to dive into their own businesses? And really, you have to kind of split off into parallel paths, because what we have to create is this dual inflection point. One is the business attractive and ready? And really, Kevin, that's a lot of what you and your team and several other of our industry partners are really focused on, is getting the business,
Yep.
put some lipstick, getting the KPIs, getting the financial statements in order.
Well, and it's really just preparing the right story, right? It's like making sure that we understand if there are any skeletons in the closet, we identify them, we know what they are, we know we have a solution for them. If there are any blips in the income statement, we are prepared to speak to them. I wouldn't call it lipstick as much as I would understanding and preparation.
Fair point. Very, very good. Also, what is the story you're telling yourself? Ooh, right? Are you personally and financially ready? Are you going to be the buyer, or excuse me, are you going to be the seller who, as you mentioned just a minute ago, is able to go in knowing where they stand financially, knowing what their key non-negotiables are, knowing where they want to be, and that way they can move through the transaction with confidence, not having to work, kind of get up to speed during the middle of the transaction, and potentially having that 11th minute, I can't do this because I don't know where I stand.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had the privilege of working with some clients that have worked with you for many, many years. And I'll just tell you, it's a different experience when folks know if the proceeds from the sale of their business are the linchpin or the victory lap with respect to their retirement savings. When they know that, and they know what they have to make it work, and we go out and come to market and bring all these buyers in, pit them against one another, tune up their offers to peak valuation, then they get the privilege of choosing the right partner, not just the top dollar, because they don't know what their future looks like. They haven't done the work on the front end to understand what they need in order to achieve financial independence for the long run.
Got a great little story on that exact subject, Kevin. Earlier this year, I took a phone call from a gentleman who I'd known for many years. And actually, sadly, previous time I had spoken with him was about 5 years ago, excuse me. And he was at that time working with his father, who was also a dentist, but was in late stages of dementia and Alzheimer's. And we were working on some family planning, and unfortunately, his dad passed away. And so a few years later, I get a call from this gentleman's name is Billy, and Billy called me. He said, "Hey, Brett, this year's the year." So this is January of 2023. "This year's the year. I'm ready to sell my business." I'm like, "Great, Billy. Hey, good to hear from you. If memory serves me correct, you've got a thriving practice. How's the family? Everybody's good." "Yep. Kids are about to go off to college." "Oh, that's wonderful. And we're just catching up." And I said, "Hey, Billy, help me understand, share with me a little bit behind your decision process. What, you mentioned now's the time. Talk to me about that a little bit." In my mind, I'm thinking he's like, "Hey, I've got a buyer," or, "Hey, I'm being cognizant of family medical history." No, it wasn't any of those. It was, "I have $5 million in the account. That was always my number. I'm ready to, number in my head, ready to sell my business." And I said, "Awesome. That's, quite an accomplishment." I said, "Hold on a minute. Is that enough?" And in the middle of a conversation when you can tell you ask a question that people weren't expecting and catch them off guard, and
Yeah.
your natural defense mechanism kicks in and you start kind of backing up a little bit. And he's like, whoa, no. I said, hey, Billy, no pressure. By the way, no judgment. Selling your business is probably the largest, single most financially important transaction you'll ever do. You don't get to do it over. And, there's a lot at stake here. So tell you what, can we do an analysis? 5 million may be the right number, but what would it mean for you, Billy, if we could prove it was enough? Or better yet, if it wasn't, what you still had to accomplish? And, you hear that audible exhale through the phone, like, yes, that was the reason I called you. I didn't know how to ask that question.
Right.
And that's really the first step here is, as we're contemplating exit planning as present tense and unlocking our financial freedom, well, you can't unlock your financial freedom if you don't know where you stand, right? So step number one in financial readiness is very simple. It's like, what do you have today? What does that net worth statement look like? Compared to what will you actually need tomorrow? What are your future needs? How much in savings, diversified investments, rollover equity, continued employment, post-transaction? What are your future needs? So then you can start to ask the question of how will the transaction provide what you need to solve that gap, right? And so interestingly enough, we do a fun exercise, and I kind of want to encourage everyone on the webcast tonight to be thinking about this, right? Simple scale, 1 to 6, 1 being I have no idea, 6 being as I'm sitting here watching this webcast tonight, I have my most recent financial report in my hands and I can definitively answer these questions, right? You'll notice there's a reason it's a scale of 1 to 6 because there's no middle. There's no average. You either have to be above average or below average, 3 or 4.
So Miller, when I went through this with you, we've done step 1 and step 2. I'm not sitting on long-term plans on exit. I'm a young man enjoying what I'm doing, but it's interesting when we completed step 1 and step 2. It actually gave me so much, gave me the knowledge. I was like, okay, I know where I am today. And it actually enabled me and empowered me to make decisions about my business from a different perspective. And I think that was one of the biggest surprises and aha moments for me. It's like, now that I'm armed with this knowledge, I look at my business differently. And I'm curious, am I unique in thinking that way, or is that something you see regularly? Unpack that a little bit for me.
I'd love to know of the folks on the webcast tonight, how many of you across those 3 questions come up with a score of 15 or greater, which means you average a 5 or a 6 in your responses, especially on the first 2, a 5 or a 6. If we take a step back, and I think we did a show of hands at Dykema, it was a minority of the crowd. And my guess would be that it's, well, actually, I don't have to guess. If less than, go back to those statistics, if 48% of business owners have done no planning and 95% of business owners have done no personal planning on what they need in the next chapter, I think it's the majority. And by the way, I don't share that to be judgmental. Actually, I share it out of love and empathy, saying, this is an easy win. This is a simple conversation to have. This is hey, as you look forward with your life, do you want to wake up in 20 years and be like, crap, I spent the last 20 years on autopilot? Or is this the time, and I'm an aviation buff, where you flip off the autopilot and you take the yoke in one hand, the stick, and the throttle in the other hand and start going, all right, Kevin, to your point, now that I know where I stand, how do I start to make decisions both in the business and in my personal life with that knowledge and that understanding? Because it changes you. It absolutely changes the perspective with which you approach that conversation, right?
For sure.
And so what that starts to look like, we use the term solving the wealth gap, is if you were struggling to answer those questions, kind of dial this down a minute. One, we need to be thinking ahead to where we're headed, anticipate those future cash flows. And this is where I think the exercise in Die with Zero of bucketing out your life, not a bucket list, rather bucketing out to say, what are the trips? What are the experiences? What are the memories by ages and health that you can achieve? Because as you head off into the horizon, there's a lot of unknowns, but what if we could plan for that 50th anniversary trip, taking the entire family on that African safari, being able to provide a wedding fund, college expenses for children and grandchildren, being able to seed the start of a business for your entrepreneurial minded high schooler, right? We got to think ahead, because thinking ahead, in addition to, and this is the scary one for most people, knowing what we're actually spending, and a quick lie detector test, write down on a piece of paper what you think you're spending, cross it out, multiply it by 2, and that's probably a more accurate descriptor of what you're actually spending. That may be pulling out your Amex statement and actually truly going through it with a pen and a highlighter. But the idea is, let's know what we're actually spending and what we'd love to achieve with our time and our wealth, so that way we can start to dial in. And once again, this is for that business owner who's saying, hey, I'm young, I'm entrepreneurial, I still want to grow. Great. Where can you optimize savings and cash flow to get there?
Yeah.
Where do you maybe say, hey, I have this unique, and I truly think this is unique. One of the concepts that we all struggle with, I personally struggle with this. What is enough? Enough is a feeling. It is not a number. But what a gift if you can actually figure out what enough is, such that you can start to say, how am I optimizing the business to be able to create these memories and these experiences, and those closer to a transaction to say, great, how do I use the closing cash, the rollover equity, all of those aspects to fuel that third aspect there of, okay, how do we use the financial aspects here to align our values and resources to actually proactively focus on our purpose, proactively focus on creating memories, proactively focus on, I think it's a little cliche when people say, live your best life. And by the way, I'm not speaking of YOLO, you only live once. That's not what I'm indicating here, but everybody has the ability, whether they believe it or not, you have more agency in your life than you realize. Most people just haven't figured out how to take ownership of their agency and to create the business, the personal life, the values that align with their purpose, right? And that's actually, we've created an assessment. I know we'll talk a little bit more about this later, Kevin, is to help people start to think through that, because that's hard to arrive at just on your own. A lot of times you have to have a guided conversation there, not necessarily from someone telling you the answer, but someone to help ask the right questions. And so we actually have kind of created this bank of assessments of, business readiness, personal readiness. And then, as we'll talk about here in just a minute, personal readiness as it relates to the next chapter, right? So, one aspect of this is clearly dialing in the business and the financials and getting financially ready. But then comes, and this picture is a bit ironic because I think this is the customary vision of retirement, right? You sell your practice, you get this incredible wire transfer, drive off into the future. And how long does that last? Depends on how many miles it is till you pull in your driveway. You pull into your garage, you turn off your car, and then you take a deep breath and go, okay, what's next? And yeah, fun little anecdote here. A couple of years ago, I had a great client. It was an orthodontist here on the East Coast who sold his practice, and we scheduled, like, literally we intentionally. I talked to him the day they sold the business. Everybody's high-fiving. It is a highlight day.
Sure.
And he had taken our advice. He had planned. He was ready. And so I called him literally 6 months to the day. I mean, we communicated via email and, chatted a couple times, but like first key conversation 6 months later. A gentleman's name's Frank. And I said, "Hey, Frank, how's retirement?" It's about 9:30 in the morning. And he goes, "Brett, it's amazing." I said, "It's everything." And then you could hear him stop himself. And he goes, "Well, there is this one thing." I said, "Really?" He goes, "Brett, look, you're married, aren't you?" I said, "Absolutely, Frank." At that time, I'd been married about 10 years. I said, "Yep, been married for 10 years. He goes, "Brett, I've been married for 40 years. And he said, for that 40 years, I was also an orthodontist, and every morning I had a routine. I got up, out the door, went to the gym, was at the practice first thing, having a cup of coffee, viewing, the financials and patient records, getting ready for the day." And he's like, "Brett, I had this vision. I viewed retirement as I was going to wake up, and my amazing wife of 40 years, we would have coffee together on the back porch, and we would talk, and we would read the paper." And about that time he started laughing. He said, "Brett, that lasted one day." And he said, "I walked out, cup of coffee in hand, ready to go." And my wife said, "Frank, you've had your routine for 40 years and I've had mine. And just because you sold your business doesn't mean I'm changing mine. You can't talk to me until 10 a.m. So, right. But, and yes, that's a little bit of satire, but it's true, because we all go through this process of expectation versus reality. You've dealt with this before. When think back, for those of you that are married, or think back to those of you who have children, of that moment you find out you're expecting, and then there's the reality, or the moment you got into dental school, the moment you decided to become a business owner. And there's this very human, and part of this is the raw emotion and the human aspect of these. We have to go through an evolution of anticipation, and usually that's what most of us are in 90% of our lives. We're in this anticipation of, oh man, this is going to be great. In retirement, I'm going to do this, or once I buy that lake house, I'm going to do that, right? And we love the happy. I mean, anticipation is wonderful. Like, we get to plan. There's a lot of positive excitement. But then comes reality of the ending. And this is the J curve for those of you that want to talk about the business case model, right? There's the ending. And I think, Kevin, where a lot of business owners get stuck is because they haven't done the planning, because they haven't really taken a critical step of who and what they want to be in retirement. They get stuck in passage, right? They get in a rut. It's a difficult time to be navigating life without a rudder. And so it takes time to get to that new normal. And I think it takes more time than normal to get there. So what we've encouraged folks to do is to say, hey, let's take a step back. This is another assessment that, and by the way, we'll be happy to share these assessments for anyone who's on the webcast tonight. But you think about it, there's multiple, and this is not necessarily an all-inclusive list, but it's a representative list of some areas of life that we kind of think about. We dedicate time and energy and resources. Clearly, for most folks, they're in that top left quadrant, right? I mean, the last X years, you've been focused on your work, that's been your primary purpose, of which has been to generate money, right? To support your family, to build for your retirement dreams, what have you. But what happens when that work is no longer your primary objective, or you've retired outright? What happens as that purpose evolves, and what happens as you reach a place of sufficiency, ideally sufficiency with your money? how can you start to, once again, step back? And this is kind of the context of the elements of life assessment, is to say, all right, where am I today? But as I look forward, are there things such as giving, philanthropy, either time or money, social, revisiting with friends, creating new community connections, leisure, travel, personal growth? Hey, is there a hobby, a skill? I mean, one of my favorite stories here is a surgeon client of mine who loves photography and has these plans to do courses and trips and to travel and to pursue this hobby of photography that she just hasn't been able to pursue up to this point. Family, health, etc. I think admittedly all of us would say, yeah, one of the things in retirement is probably get into better shape, right? When I got a little more time, I need to get in the gym or go out and walk a little more. These things do not happen if you're in autopilot, though.
It's really interesting to me to see you kind of walk through this. I think, but growing up, your dad had a stockbroker, right? It was all about kind of making sure we had enough nuts squirreled away for the winter. Dad recently retired. He like many folks that were in the healthcare world, took COVID as an opportunity to go, I am 74 years old. Yeah, I'm only working 1 day a month, but what in the world am I doing? So he jumped out of it. He's got purpose. And when I call him these days, the first question I ask him is, where are you? Because I never know where he is, right? He's in
Right.
Iceland, he's in London, he's visiting friends and family all over the country. But this is critical stuff that you don't get, right? Most of the time you don't get this stuff unless you do, like you said, pause, reflect, and think critically about it. So I think for our viewers this evening, this is very likely a new message, a new thoughtful way to begin thinking about what exit does look like. Because when you do this and you go through this exercise, yes, obviously it's about the money. Yes, obviously it's about exiting at the top. But on the other side of that, and we always talk about the life after the trade from an operational perspective, like, did the DSO say what they're going to do? Are you really only working 100 days? Are you really only working 3 days a week, or whatever it may be? But this is really the bigger purpose. That when you sell the business, the wire hits, you work for 3 to 5 years. What's next? And this is just so critical to begin thinking about, and really begin thinking about in your 30s, in your 40s. It's never,
absolutely.
It is a present tense action item that everybody in every industry should be thinking about, at least revisiting annually and recalculating the math.
I mean, Kevin, you and I discussed this at a personal level. I do this quarterly.
Yeah.
This actually informs, for those of you that use Traction and EOS, these inform my quarterly rocks.
100%.
38 years old. And I would encourage that it's a missing piece of at least my industry. I think the financial advisory wealth management industry is evolving to where, in 5 to 10 years, it's continuing to be less and less about the technical and more about the role of the advisor. And I'll use the term, we are an industry of emerging life coaches, because we need to help. And I think this is probably a good way to kind of segue and transition. And I want to be respectful of everybody's evenings of kind of where does this all come together? Well, it all comes together that, what's the prudent thing to do as a business owner who's thinking of, how do I unlock my financial freedom? Regardless, once again, of what stage you are in the business ownership cycle. One is, you got to know where you stand. You got to know where you stand to make prudent decisions. 2 is, start preparing yourself. It's, the best, the old adage, the best day to start preparing was yesterday, right? Second best day is today. Well, great. Prepare yourself financially. Understand those aspects of the wealth gap. Understand where you have deficiencies in your element of life assessment so you can start to craft a plan, right? Build the team, build the plan. Because our goal is that we don't want folks simply saying, yeah, I transitioned. Gosh, that just sounds awful. Be like, no, I transitioned well. I optimized value, did it on my terms, and with the confidence and clarity to be all in on the next chapter. I mean, that opportunity exists for everyone.
Let me bring this to kind of a real world example that we see all the time. You know, every group practice, doctor founded, debt funded group out there is kind of facing big critical decisions when they have the opportunity to buy a new practice or centralize services. When you're buying a new practice, you're taking on additional personally guaranteed debt. You are hopefully creating additional incremental EBITDA, which should translate into incremental enterprise value. And then for those of you who are in scaling mode and building out a leadership team and a headquarters or centralized service offices with a call center and revenue cycle management, what you're actually doing is chewing into your existing EBITDA and thinking that that's going to be give you the opportunity to grow more quickly. But before you make a big business decision, I can't stress this enough. You've got to know where you stand, because it's possible and actually very likely you could be in much better personal financial personal financial situation than you may know. And the value of your business today could be at such a point to where if you did go through a liquidity event or partnership event, you could go ahead and be financially independent. Then what you do is you roll some equity. So you share in the upside of the future vision of the business, but you don't own 100% of the risk. If I've learned one thing over the last, I guess since starting my dental practice, Mundo Dentistry, oh my gosh, almost 10 years ago now, like owning dental practices in particular is risky. There's a lot of human capital. Your most valuable asset walks out of the door every single night at 5 p.m. and you sit there and pray they come back the next day. And I think COVID's taught us how hard it is. The Great Resignation taught us how hard it is. And the risk it's just very, very real. And as I'm talking to entrepreneurs these days, I'm saying, why do you want to continue to take on incremental risk if you don't have to? If you know you're there and you want to own it for one more year, great. But what you don't have to do over that 12-month period is buy 2 more locations, sign up for 2 new leases, sign up for 2 new personally guaranteed loans. You don't have to do that because you're already there. Enjoy the cash flow for 12 more months, then let's take it to market. That's really the crux of all of this. Take on only as much risk as you have to achieve the goals you set up for yourself, your family, and your estate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and Kevin, I think to maybe simplify that into a small statement is get out of autopilot, right?
Absolutely.
It's time to move into intentional living, intentional planning, because that's going to be effectively what allows you to enjoy the journey. And at the end of the day, that's the goal. Enjoy the journey of this life, enjoy the journey of business ownership, enjoy the journey of the transaction, if and when and how that occurs, knowing that you're doing it with confidence and clarity. So thank you so much for having me on this evening and certainly allowing me to tell my side of the story.
Yeah, I just really appreciate your perspective, right? It's a breath of fresh air. And I really wanted to make sure that folks who were not able to attend and we're not some of those lucky few 100 that were in the room are able to hear the message, because I think it's important. It's been life-changing to me, and I suspect it's been life-changing to those who've listened today. As Brett and I have been working through these concepts, we said, what can we do? How can we help the broader dental community, the entrepreneurial community inside of the business of dentistry, gain the insight, gain the knowledge, and figure out where they are today. The planning we should have done yesterday that we can absolutely start tonight. And what we came up with is a pretty nifty tool. So what we're offering to the market today is something that we're calling a transaction readiness assessment. And this is a tool where we're going to really take a deep look at not just the value of your business like we've done for thousands of dentists nationwide, but also look at your personal balance sheet and the assets that you own, and give you a view on what your entire balance sheet looks like and where financial independence gets achieved and where you are in that journey. So you can actually enjoy the journey from where you are to getting to that ultimate exit and ultimate financial independence. So we're going to offer this complimentary to anyone on the webinar this evening. You can scan that QR code. We are more than happy to spend the time with you. We're going to request a little bit of information from you, and then in turn, we're going to offer up a 2-hour consultation where we'll share with you the insights that we've discovered and help you begin to think proactively today about what your future looks like.
Kevin, no, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity set, and as well as helping to create this knowledge and insight. I mean, our goal is that we create empowerment and better decision making, and no better way to do that than to help boost everybody's confidence scores on those aspects by going through this assessment. So we'd love the opportunity to dive in and to help you take a step back and do a realization of where you are.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to get to do these with you. I love it when there's great collaboration, when you get two teams that have deep knowledge. Your side on really the personal balance sheet, and us on the practice valuation, marrying those two pieces of the puzzle together to enable people to make great long-term strategic decisions. Brett, it's been great to see you. I can't believe we had to get to Denver to see each other. When we all kind of settle in after the summer, I look forward to seeing you for a cup of coffee real soon. To those of you who joined us tonight, thank you. It's always a privilege. If you actually insert questions in the chat, we will get back to you within 24 hours as always. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and we will look forward to seeing you in the fall. Everybody have a great night. Thanks again.